Matt Reeves' The Batman is a film that not only fulfilled but exceeded my expectations. And in this video, I'm going to be analyzing the film in depth, almost a scene by scene breakdown. And joining me is a YouTuber, Kshitij Shukla, with his YouTube channel Apropos of Cinema, who's also going to be talking about this film with me. So, without further ado, let's begin. In the opening scene, we see a POV shot, which is quite vital because a major portion of the Batman movie is about perspective. Factors like us hearing Riddler's breathing play a part in adding a layer of mystery and creepiness to the scene, as we know that a family is being watched. The film initially led me to believe that this was the Wayne family, as the filmmakers play around with the lore of the character and our pre existing knowledge of the same characters. The song Ave Maria is being played, which foreshadows Riddler later singing it. We then see Mayor Mitchell alone in his house watching the news. It is then revealed to us that Riddler is standing right behind him. His still movements and not knowing how long he has been there only makes the scene more creepy. Close up shots add to the intensity, but when the Riddler finally chooses to attack, it's a god's eye view shot, showing the mayor's powerlessness in the situation and how small he really feels. And when Riddler is repeatedly attacking the mayor, it's a low angle shot, visually showing who is more powerful and how the Riddler is superior in this moment. This scene not only sets the external plot of the killings in motion, but also lets the audience know about the menacing antagonist of the film. Then we get to see one of my favorite scenes from the film, Batman's opening monologue. Subjective filmmaking in comic book movies has been kind of dead these days, and this film revives that with flying colors. The monologue allows us to enter the headspace of our protagonist, Bruce Wayne. What I like about it is that the scene is shown from the point of view of the criminals of Gotham City, with Batman's narration to make it seem like they are being watched by him. The scene maintains rhythmic momentum as Michael Giacchino's score builds to a rising crescendo until it finally pays off when Batman emerges from the shadows. And I love that we get to see Batman as an actual intimidating creature of the night who can be anywhere in the dark, watching you. When Batman fights, it feels brutal, and the impeccable sound design aids the fight scenes as we not only get to hear the powerful punches but also how they react to water since it is raining and notice how to maintain power dynamics. Batman is always in the middle of the frame, he is the center of attention, and when the man he saved is afraid of him, it begins Batman's character arc, where he is initially feared even by the people he swears to protect. This is what needs to be changed, and this is the theme that is introduced beautifully. Then he realizes that he is needed by the bat symbol, and as Batman enters the crime scene of Mayor Mitchell's murder, the camera movement is minimal. It is slowly pushing in, almost as if the walls are closing in, as if they are being watched by someone. And Batman is an outcast here. The police are indifferent towards him because he's outside the law, and the only one he can trust here is Gordon. And the film does have a little bit of humor here and there, but it is not needlessly forced into a scene to bring out a laugh. It is situational humor as a detective bumps into an intimidating Batman to contrast the seriousness of a crime scene for a brief moment, but never once depriving the gravity of the scene.
And so the idea that you would be in a room with a bunch of forensic cops and beat cops and all these people, there'd been the murder of this high profile figure like the mayor, and a guy walks in a cowl with a cape, that's a little insane, right? Like you'd be like, what is this guy doing? And so I thought, in this iteration, because it's the early days, the only person on the GCPD who trusts Batman is Gordon.
And here we get to see Batman's detective skills at play, carefully observing every minute detail and piecing the puzzle slowly. And then he realizes that the mayor's body was first found by his young son, and Batman instantly sees himself in that little kid, and we understand this just from a simple glance. This is when Nirvana's Something in the Way begins to play, giving the film its personality. We hear Bruce's monologue. He's a protagonist who has clear goals and motives, and he has been Batman for a while now, but he is doubting his decisions. He tortures himself by replaying his trauma over and over in his head. He also does this directly in a way, as he records everything he sees as Batman and watches the footage later on. It is refreshing to see a comic book film that is purely subjective, that doesn't look at the events in it from an objective standpoint, but also lets us know how our main character feels about this, and how the monologue allows us to empathize with Bruce and his internal struggle of attempting to make Gotham a better place. Through his conversation with Alfred, we come to know that Bruce doesn't really care about his persona as Bruce Wayne the billionaire. He barely does any work to maintain Wayne Enterprises. He's so obsessed with maintaining his family legacy by being Batman that he doesn't at all care about what happens to him. In screenwriting, one way to write a character is to give the protagonist a lie that they believe in, and that lie is tested and challenged to such a point where the character either ends up making an internal change or sticks to their principles and most probably ends up in a worse situation. Bruce believes that the only way to rid Gotham of crime and villainy is to become the symbol for vengeance. We see one of the problems of this ideology in the opening scene when a man Batman saved is terrified of him. But Bruce does not realize the error of his ways yet, which is why, to show him that, is the antagonist of the film Riddler. Batman and Gordon begin to solve the Riddler's riddles and learn that there's more to what's on the surface. Mayor Mitchell was cheating on his wife with another girl, Annika, and thus register the fact that Riddler's mission is to simply reveal to the people of Gotham its evident corruption. And as Batman finds Selina working in the 44 Below, which is a lounge where the rich and powerful Gothamites often meet, he begins to follow her. And I love the filmmaking here as we get to see Selina inside a cab, and the focus then shifts to Bruce riding his bike behind her. Later, they team up to fulfill their own ambitions. Selina wishes to find Annika, and Batman wishes to be able to put an end to Riddler's crimes. And before Selina goes to the 44 Below, there's a great scene where Batman looks at her. We're in Selina's point of view. He looks at her with a form of compassion. He cares about her. Until we find out that he was just making sure his contact lens cameras were in place. Which puts into question, does Bruce really care about her, or is he very selfish? Maybe he can't really express his feelings for her because he has been a recluse all his life. It progresses the character and makes me ask questions that build on the character and gives them a sense of humanity, making me empathize with them. Now, when Selina is in the lounge, it mainly comprises of several POV shots, emotionally allowing us to connect with Selina, but plot-wise, it's because Bruce is viewing what Selina is watching. The story has new revelations as we learn that many of Gotham's trusted officials and cops are often seen in the lounge challenging their authority. When the district attorney Gil Colson leaves the lounge, there's a shot inside his car where we briefly see the Riddler patiently waiting for him. Visually, he's blurred out, but through his silhouette, his menacing breathing, and his score, we understand instantly what's going on. And as the Riddler attacks Coulson, we barely see any of it. But in reality, it only makes it more terrifying because we are left to imagine the rest of what could possibly be happening. There's a God's eye view shot once again showing how powerless Coulson is at this moment, and before the scene ends, we get to see the Gotham seawall briefly, setting up for what's to come in the climax of the film. Now, with Bruce, he's in a situation where he has to make an appearance as Bruce Wayne the billionaire. And even though he decides to go ahead and do it, he does it because he believes that going to the mayor's funeral as Bruce Wayne will allow him to get closer to cracking the case with Riddler's murders. When Alfred gives Bruce the cufflinks his father gave him, the importance of that cufflink increases tenfold, which is why the next shot is a close-up of it, showing us how personally Bruce is attached with it. When Bruce visits the funeral, we see everything happening. But when Bruce sees Falcone, it cuts to a close-up. This is serious. And also seeing the woman with the boots is a callback to Selina, as this is how we first saw her. And this moment is entirely from Bruce's perspective. We are thinking what he is thinking. During his talk with Falcone, he talks about how Bruce's father Thomas saving Falcone's life one night, which is something that happened in the comics. When Bruce is walking inside, he is examining for clues or hints, and this is when we faintly hear Riddler's haunting breathing, orally signaling to us that he is here. But the fact that we don't get to see him makes it more terrifying. Bruce stumbles upon a Riddler supporter who believes that Thomas Wayne's death was deserved. We get to hear the people's opinions on events that Bruce is affected by. This man also makes an appearance in the climax of the film. As Bruce talks to the soon-to-be Mayor Bella Real, he notices Mayor Mitchell's son. Just through a look, we feel his pain. This is what Bruce has been fighting for. He is Batman so that no other kid has to go through the trauma that he went through. This is why he dons that cape and cowl and goes out every night. He sees himself in that kid. Bruce has never felt more like a recluse. And then the scene shifts its focus. Something is wrong. The camera stays inside with the people, creating tension because of the mystery the sound provides. As the car crashes and the DA Gil Colson comes out of it with a bomb around his neck, the camera movement is slow and patient. It slowly zooms in, creating the feel of unease. Later that day, when Batman enters the scene, he once again walks from within the shadows. As he talks to the Riddler through the phone, it is a series of close ups because this is the first time Batman and Riddler are talking to each other directly. And as the DA panics, fearing for his life because he finds himself in a situation where he needs to answer the Riddler's riddles to save his life, this is when the camera goes from still shots to moving actively with the DA to really make us feel how terrified he really is. And after the DA is killed and Batman survives a bomb to his face, with the help of Gordon, he successfully escapes the police station. Then Gordon and Batman realize that they need to have a talk with Penguin once again, and so they find him amidst a warehouse. But they find themselves to be overpowered by Penguin's men. Selina and Bruce realize that Annika was murdered by the cop Kenzie and Falcone's men, and this is a major turning point in Selina's life. This was her goal throughout the film. And this is when the Batmobile enters the scene, and I just love the way the scene builds up to this moment, just through the use of the revving sound of the vehicle and just through patient visuals. We really get to feel how strong this monstrosity of a car really is. Then begins one of my favorite scenes in the movie, the car chase scene. Batman chases the Riddler, and it is brilliantly directed. There are many wide shots that show the geography of the scene, visually letting us know where the characters are in relation to each other, and there are many shots from the point of view of the vehicles, giving this scene the ecstatic energy and allowing us to really feel the speed of the vehicles. But we also get to see the Penguin and Batman inside their respective cars, reacting to what is happening. It feels like we are there with them, looking at all of this from the side view mirror. After Batman rides through an explosion like it's nothing and tumbles Penguin's car, we get to see the money shot of the movie that was promised to us in the trailers, of Batman walking in the rain with the raging fire roaring behind him. The music makes it sound like he's almost a cowboy. After an interrogation with the Penguin, Batman and Gordon go to an abandoned orphanage and figure out Riddler's next victim is Bruce Wayne himself. Batman rushes to Wayne Manor, and I adore the way this scene was edited. The scene intercuts between Batman racing against time to save Alfred and Alfred opening a mysterious package back at Wayne Manor. When Batman makes a phone call, his voice goes from husky and brooding to that of a desperate man. Bruce is vulnerable at this moment, and when Batman reaches home, he realizes that it was too late. The immaculate editing here plays with time, leading us to think we know what is happening before subverting our expectations to show how it tricked us into believing that what we saw was linear. Batman watches over his city like a protector. He's watching it get worse, but the sunset almost makes it seem like there's a small possibility that things can get better.
So, I'm gonna hijack Detox's video to talk about something I always talk about: Batman. The Batman is about the Batman, but it's also about so much more in this film. In the earlier versions of Batman, we have seen Bruce's point of view, how he's the rich guy trying to avenge his parents. That has been the main storyline. But in this one, we are also shown one other perspective: the Catwoman's. Catwoman and Batman are both people with the same trauma and goals. While our boy Bruce was grown up privileged as a rich white boy, Selina was a poor girl, and how that is addressed in this movie and how that changes her goals slightly as compared to Bruce's goals are explored. She's not ruthless, but is willing to do things Bruce can't. Bruce and Selina are not merely implied lovers in this film, but two very broken individuals who want to do right, and both of them save each other by the end of the movie. Selina helps Bruce realize the power of hope, while Bruce helps Selina create a rule to not scar herself with the killing. This is not the only way the Batman differs from more traditional Batman storylines. When you look at all other Batman films, no matter how realistic they are, Thomas Wayne is always shown to be a very godlike, noble, and messiah figure, who is always there to help the needy and the poor, who thinks good about the people of Gotham. But in this movie, they gave a spin to that. In this movie, they imply that maybe he was not as noble as people say, or as Bruce always perceived he was. They first outrightly say it, and then when Bruce asks Alfred about the same, he says a different story, which makes the story a little ambiguous. So at the end, we don't know what Thomas Wayne was really like. It's up to the viewer's interpretation, and solely their interpretation, which again is something new added to the Batman movies. Never been done before. Now, I'm not going to say the Batman is without flaws. Bruce saying to Alfred, "You are not my father," and him trying to reconnect in the hospital scene looks very haphazard and half-baked. So the film could have done better with that. But if we keep these minor criticisms aside, The Batman is a great film overall. Okay, back to our boy Detox.
Catwoman catches Kenzie and gets a hold of an audio tape of Annika's last moments. And what I find to be excellently done is just how an entire scene of just an audio tape being played with no flashbacks, but with just the reactions of the characters, managed to keep me as engaged as I was throughout the rest of the movie. The characters are introduced to a new set of stakes once they know that Falcone is the one who runs the city, no matter who the mayor is. This sets Selina on the path of revenge to kill Falcone, her father, for killing her mother and Annika. Batman tells her that this isn't the way, and rightfully so, as this movie gets his character and moral conflict excellently. But Selina ignores his words and is on her own task to murder Falcone, and after a spectacularly shot hallway sequence, Batman stops Selina from going down that path of darkness.
That's why when the scene where Selina is about to kill Falcone happens, it brings a tear to my eye. Because this is one broken individual telling the other one not to go down that path, to save herself from the misery.
And as Falcone gets arrested, he is shot dead. Batman realizes that the Riddler had been living nearby the lounge all along, and so the GCPD and Batman track him down inside a diner, and as they catch him, we don't really see the cops enter the diner and arrest Riddler. That would have been boring, but the way this film shows the scene is very creative. We see the Riddler from behind as we hear the entire police department flock inside the diner through the remarkable sound design, and then the film cuts to a wide shot as we really get to feel the scale of the scene by seeing just how many cops are surrounding Riddler. And as he is getting arrested, there are close-up shots between the Batman and the Riddler, because this is when the protagonist and antagonist see each other physically for the first time. It serves a narrative purpose. Back at Riddler's apartment, as all the cops are investigating it, Batman looks at a wall and all the papers and research work on it and realizes that the Riddler knows who he really is, and I love that the information is conveyed to us visually. The film doesn't challenge the audience's intellect. Batman then goes to meet Riddler at Arkham Prison, and Pattinson's acting really shines here. As Riddler repeatedly calls out Bruce's name, Bruce looks down. He's vulnerable, weak, he's letting his guard down. He has been unmasked, and all of this is conveyed through just a look, until the part where this is undone, where we realize that the Riddler doesn't really know that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And the Riddler talks about how Batman inspired him to pursue his goal to show Gotham its true colors. This is a part of Batman's character arc, which I will elaborate on later. When Batman comes to know that Riddler has something big planned, Riddler begins to sing Ave Maria, which of course is the song that was playing in the opening scene of the movie and also symbolizes impending doom. Remember that Gotham seawall we briefly saw when the Riddler attacked the DA? Well, that was one of the places where Riddler placed a bomb and all of Gotham begins to flood. And I love how when Batman figures out the Riddler's plan in his apartment, the editing match cuts from the map on his floor to the actual location before the explosion. Batman battles Riddler's henchmen, and one of the henchmen quotes Batman about embodying vengeance, and this is when he understands the consequences of his misguided belief. Later, when he falls into the water, saving Gotham's residents from getting electrocuted, the noise quietens down. Batman uses his flare to guide the people to safety, and when he lends out a hand to who we supposedly think is meant for the mayor, Bella Real, emerges from the darkness is Mayor Mitchell's son. At this moment, Bruce is saving himself, essentially. He guides the people of Gotham to safety, and in this beautiful shot, we really get to see the shining beacon of hope that Batman really is. Bruce's final monologue is a neat little bow as Nirvana's Something in the Way plays once again, finalizing his character arc of realizing that the way to bring about real change within the city of Gotham is by becoming a figure of hope, which is also why this is when we get to see Batman out in the day for the first time. I think it executes Bruce's internal change really well. Now, there is a possible future sequel set up with the Joker, and personally, this is the weakest scene in the movie for me because the entire film had felt like, an actual film and not a payoff to its predecessor and a setup for its successor. But this particular scene felt very studio mandated, which is why it stands out like a sore thumb. In the final minutes of the movie, Batman has the choice to go live a life with Selina. It is something that can bring him true happiness, but upon noticing the bat signal, he knows what he has to do. It's a scene that reminded me a lot of the first Spider Man movie, where Peter has the choice to be with Mary Jane, but chooses to live a life of responsibility that comes at the cost of his personal life. But Selina and Bruce still share different ideologies. Selina is of the belief that Gotham will never change, but Batman has hope for his city. He knows that he's fighting a losing battle, but the fact that he doesn't lose hope makes him admirable. And that's why he's a hero that can influence many people today. And many comic book movies nowadays don't really make their heroes inspirational and someone people can look up to. And the Batman gets that and makes its protagonist someone who inspires people. And it's just refreshing to see a superhero who actually feels like a hero. And as Batman and Catwoman ride off into the sunset, they part ways. As she leaves, there's a hint of sadness on Bruce's face. But he looks ahead, knowing what he has to do, and he's ready to face anything that comes in his way. And so, the movie ends. The Batman was one of those films I was anticipating for a very, very, very long time, and I'm just really happy that I loved it, and so did the rest of the world. I had a great time talking about this movie in detail, and I'd love to thank my friend Shitij from his wonderful channel Apropos of Cinema. Once again, subscribe, he makes great content, for helping me out and making a small cameo in this video. Thank you for watching and sticking by if you're still watching. Like the video and subscribe, you know the drill, and just, yeah, have a great day. Bye bye.